Hi, this is Pat Moorhead with More Insights and Strategy, and we are here for another exciting FinTech Friday. And I'm here with my awesome co-host, Vice President FinTech and Retail Tech, Melody Brew. Mel, how you doing?
Oh, doing well. It's been a crazy
Start
day.
of spring break, right?
Yeah, right. It's the beginning of spring break, and we've got South by Southwest starting here in Austin. And so one of my children went to the airport this morning to go on a trip, and his flight was canceled. So things have already gotten crazy here in Austin, and it's one thing having the kids home; it's another thing trying to get rid of them.
Well, and as a reminder, you're kind of taking care of them a lot, so it's very busy. Career woman, mom. I it's so hard
Yeah, it's
when you do what you do. I missed International Women's Day, but this is my homage to one international woman, Melody. Thank you for everything you do out there. So,
well, thanks.
with that said, we have an incredible show here. We have a ton to talk about. Sorry about we weren't on last week, but Pat had to get some man work done, which I won't go into actually, not just man work. This is everybody gets this medical procedure when they hit between 40 and 50, but I'll leave it at that. Even more exciting than my doctor's appointment was we're going to be talking about autonomous retail. See, I told you this is more than fintech. This is retail tech. And remind me, Mel, we should probably rename the show. We're going to be talking about cutting the wires to Russia, the impact that even tech came and put their 2 cents in beyond retail tech and fintech. We're going to talk about the power of payroll. Ooh, name of a cool company out there. Name of a product. Atomic is the name of the company. $40 million Series B, and a new acronym of the week, a modified acronym of the week, KYC. You're making this hard on me, Mel. I mean, just when I learn an acronym, I think you're going to tell me that the same acronym that we defined maybe 5 weeks ago is now a different acronym with the same 3 letters. Tell me
Yep,
it's not so. But
I know.
don't tell me yet. Let's just dive into the first topic because,
Yep.
word of the week or acronym of the week is our last thing. So,
Yep.
autonomous retail, why now? Everybody's talking autonomous. I mean, whether it's moving containers inside of infrastructure, whether it is security, it's all about autonomy. Tell us about what this means in retail.
Yeah, so I think that, there were a couple of big drivers for this. Obviously, the pandemic was a big driver of this in terms of why customers would want it and why they would use it. And one of that was just that everything was contactless at the point of the pandemic, right? We were looking at contactless payments, contactless delivery. Everything needed to be contactless, but there still are places where you need to go into a store and pick something up. There's curbside delivery, or curbside pickup, all of these various options. Now there's autonomous retail. And then when we got to it, the labor shortage added to that. And now we've got, sort of this great resignation where we add to, now we've got labor issues on top of fewer people wanting to come into a store. So you have that, those are the things that sort of added to people wanting to try it, wanting to use it. But then it turns out you have all of this actionable data, instant and actionable data that happens from having these autonomous retail stores. The way that this works, and in this particular situation, this company is called AiFi.
Cool.
They just raised $65 million in their Series B. They use just cameras. So this isn't like how a lot of the, just walk out type of stores originally started, which is weighted shelves, which uses that's a pretty big investment to get a store like that started. These are just cameras that are set up all over the store. They hone in on a product and a person, so they know where everything is and how it moves throughout a store, throughout the whole process, walk in, walk out. And so they know, that you, Pat, are picking something up and that you're walking out. Although there's no identifiable information. There's no facial recognition. There's no biometrics. So there's a real interesting security element here where they're not capturing actually who you are. They're just capturing you. Basically, they're forming like an avatar of you. And then they see what you pick up, what you put down, and then you get all of this data from that. Immediately you know what's selling, what's not selling, what aisles are actually doing better, what parts of the store are doing better, all of this. So what they've seen is that the wait time for people to check out is decreased by about 50%, and cart size is increased by about 100%. So I think we're going to see a lot of this.
Gosh, cart size 100%. So I go in, I plan to spend, I don't know, maybe I have $100 in my head, so I'm leaving with $200.
You might spend 200. Yeah,
I know I can do math. Can you believe it? Like
that's
twice. I
amazing.
actually did that all on my own without
All
pulling
in
out
your
my
head.
calculator app. So
The other really interesting thing about this one is that they partnered with Verizon on this, and they're using 5G. So this is, for me, I was like, oh, this is actually like a real use case of 5G, that we're seeing actually working. There's so many things with these like musical festivals and everything where they're setting up these sort of kiosks or temporary retail stores at places like music festivals or NFL games or whatever it is. And they're able to set something up with very little hardware, with very little infrastructure required, because this is just a software solution with some cameras and very little staffing. So if it does require a little bit of staffing, it's like zero training, right? Because it's the same thing. The cameras know what they're doing. It's just a real easy setup. So for something to go from city to city, like on a music tour or something like that, this is a really easy solution for autonomous retail.
I have a dumb question for you. I watched some of these videos of what's going on in San Francisco with people coming in with knapsacks and filling their knapsacks full of, I forget what the limit is, $999 worth of stuff
Yeah.
from CVS. Any thoughts on shrinkage, or is this just kind of where, you put autonomous retail in a place that just, this is not necessarily gonna happen?
I think there has to be some security concerns around that. And I do think, although they don't go about it to capture facial recognition and data around the person using it, that could be used probably in terms of like for criminal usage or for criminal use if needed. So, and I think, and that kind of on a separate note on that is there could be a use for facial recognition or biometrics in the event of, like, say, a liquor store or somewhere where you have to confirm identity. But yeah, that is definitely a question around security for shrinkage, for theft, for all kinds of things. But I would guess that that is definitely taken into account in terms of where it's being put. But I don't think that you have much of a difference there between whether you have a human or whether you have cameras. In fact, you
Certainly
actually,
doesn't matter in downtown San Francisco.
right? I mean, really, when you think about it, it's actually, you're not putting humans' lives at risk
Yeah.
by putting, this still does, this isn't like replacing humans with robots. There still have to be humans on the back end kind of configuring this and still kind of running the show in some sense. But you don't have somebody who's going to get, held at gunpoint if somebody does decide to hold up the store.
Yeah.
So
By the way, I
it's
did, in all fairness, I forgot the whole, the woman in the video, on the website I showed, put her phone up to the door and the door automatically opens. And that doesn't mean
yes,
that, it's going to keep somebody from maybe coming in there and trailing you, but, we have something very similar in banking, where
yes,
we have to do that. Even in downtown Austin, you can do that. Now, the difference is there's not, dollar bills sitting on the shelf for you to come in and walk out with. But no, I think this is the wave of the future. And particularly, I mean, look at fast food, right? Where the cost of having a person versus having a machine to take orders, as it relates to accuracy and cost, is definitely going towards this autonomous retail part. Amazon has obviously done a lot in this,
mhm,
and even Qualcomm is in the game, working with Walmart on some autonomous retail solutions. So good stuff. Let's go to our
yeah.
second topic: Russia, Ukraine. I mean, my gosh, what a horrible story that's going on. And of course, fintech is a major topic of discussion here.
Yeah, I mean it's been on the radar, from the beginning in terms of everything from the crypto transfers to Swift transfers, and now there were some fintechs that immediately came out and they blocked wires to Russia, any wire transfers, Wise, Remitly, Revolut, a bunch of these wire transfer services or fintechs that have wire transfer services blocked any transfers to Russia. There were initially some ways around that, like prepaid Visa cards, prepaid Mastercards that you could fund for somebody in Russia. But now Visa and Mastercard originally blocked financial institutions. Now they've blocked payments. Now they've just completely suspended Russian operations.
Yeah.
So, I think what's happening here is it's really interesting because there's so many different sanctions, right? Like the UK, the EU, and the US all have their own sort of set sanctions. And so all of these different firms, depending on which markets they're in, whether they're providing payments or services, they're kind of covered by all of these different rules. So a lot of these fintechs, they kind of came out and made a statement in terms of like sort of morally made a statement and said, we're not doing this. Some said, we don't know what we can do, and so we're not going to do it.
Right.
And then some of them just had the sanctions. And I think, there's so much at play here. And I think we've seen this just throughout the tech industry in general, where a lot of companies have just come out and said, we are going to support Ukraine and we're going to shut down operations in Russia. Or we have somebody like WeWork who said, we do really well there. We're going to continue operations there.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of backlash for that. And then you've got today Michael Dell coming out and saying he's going to give $15 million to the Ukraine. So definitely tech has taken a side here. And, I think there's a balance that has to be struck of like providing the services and the goods and services and the things that the people in Russia need, who aren't part of this war, who aren't part of the attack on Ukraine. Think about like somebody's grandma or whoever who's in Russia who relies on somebody sending her money every month, can't get her money. There's just a lot of fallout in general of all of this, and fintech is sort of at the center of it, because not only are they saying we're not going to send it, but they're taking a financial hit for that, right? I mean, they get paid on these transfers. That's how they make their money.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm trying to do is gameplay this to the next step, which is okay. So what happens next? And some folks in Russia are jumping on Alipay, right? Like who are the friends? I think you can count Russia, China, Syria, and Belarus right now, and North Korea doesn't have any connection to the outside world. So that's not a factor here. But in a way, I'm expecting a financial block of companies. Russia and China are really easy aligners on that, right?
Right.
So they don't necessarily get cut off again. I think as surprised as some people were for the full scale invasion of Ukraine, I think Russia has to be surprised that they've been completely isolated financially. Not only can they not move money through the SWIFT system, but the major credit card payment arms, you're not able to use a Visa or a Mastercard inside of Russia. Or if you're Russian and you were stuck outside the country, you still can't use it as well. And we've seen on paper a financial collapse of Russia. Stock trading has been halted. The value of the ruble has gone down by 75%. Oil has shot up, but it is very interesting how much fintechs came in to I don't know, flex their muscles. And you'd even talked about, okay, it's more than fintechs, right?
Right. I mean, there were a bunch of different tech companies who, said they were going to stop operations or stop, Apple said they weren't going to sell products there. There were a bunch of, Facebook had its own sanctions, all these companies before they were mandated. And I think that there's definitely the part about the disinformation and all of that has to be handled properly. Right. And then there's just when you look at just all of the again, kind of the hit that these companies have to take, and they're willing to take it because it's worth it, right? Like, but it just sort of, my heart sort of bleeds for the people who, you know, they didn't vote for Putin.
Right. Well,
The
they certainly
ones,
didn't, put the invasion up to a vote. You probably also noticed that cryptocurrency got a huge increase. I was kind of praying that Bitcoin went down to 30,000, and then I was going to buy a ton, and it was like almost touched. I think it was 32, and then this hit, and Bitcoin kind of flew up there. So I guess
yeah,
I'll wait for the next time that it collapses to jump in.
yeah. And that did become one of the ways that people could still send money for a while. There, it can get tricky now at this point, but I mean, you certainly, there's been a lot of Bitcoin being sent to the Ukraine, or to Ukraine, I shouldn't say the Ukraine.
Yeah, I saw that. That was a pretty cool activity there. So let's move to the next topic here, and this is the power of payroll. Atomic's $40 million Series B. Here we go.
Yeah,
Another high
about
flyer here.
another,
This is great.
we're talking about another Series B, but and this is sort of a quick transition to something totally different. But this is really interesting. So this company Atomic, they do payroll. They're basically, their APIs power banks, credit unions, and fintech to connect consumers with their financial data. They raised 40 million in Series B. They weren't actually going out for funding. So investors came to them and said, this data is so important. We want to give you money to expand your footprint. I mean, imagine, you know what it's like to raise money, Pat. I mean, I know like you haven't done that for
I've done a
your
road
company.
show. I've done a road show before, and it is
You've
brutal.
seen
But
it,
this is
right? I
like,
mean,
this sounds like they didn't even have to do a road show.
no, no, no. Investors came to them. I mean, this was like they they were not raising money, but this is something that, is so powerful right now, payroll data. When you think about, when you have somebody's information about their payroll, you have their job history, you have, so much of their financial information, and that data can be permissioned to companies like, mortgage and insurance and all of these different fintechs and credit unions and banks and whatever, that all can connect with this data and offer people the the services that they need. Like, think about an underwriter for a mortgage. They have to get all of your tax returns, all of these things, but when you have all of this data based on your information, it's not. I think what we're seeing also is that credit score isn't everything anymore. This has been, sort of something that's been happening for a while now, that there's more
It's
to.
it's flawed in so many ways, but it's one of these things that is kind of hung on because, well, a lot of people don't like to change, and the courts have ruled that credit scores can be upheld. And I think it's crazy. I was paying for almost everything in cash about 10 years ago, and then I tried to get a loan for my house, and I literally got denied. Even though in assets, net assets, I could have bought the house for cash, but why do that? I didn't have any credit. It was
Yeah,
embarrassing, and it also sends the completely wrong message.
right. But there's so much more that goes into decisioning now in terms of, payroll data, job history, all of the stuff that all of this information can provide. So it just shows, and the second part of that too is that more people now are using digital banks for their primary banking account or their primary checking account than ever before. So companies like Chime and even PayPal and these sort of neobanks are winning out over the Wells Fargos and the JP Morgan Chases of the world. So people are really getting accustomed to this digital experience.
Yeah.
And so the more data that those banks or neobanks own, the better. So whoever owns your direct deposit basically owns the customer. And so
Yeah.
I think,
It's funny. In the end, it's all about trust, right?
yes,
It's all about trust. And, it's not that banks are necessarily losing trust, but some of these high flying companies. It's like, if I really trust in a certain brand, and I have this thing I want to buy that's right there, and I kind of want to do it, and I think I'm going to be doing a lot of that. Why not make a connection there, right?
Mhm.
Maybe if I can get an introductory rate that makes sense. It is interesting how much trust people have on these platforms, even though they're technically not banks.
Right. They're not, and the thing is, though, I think that they've earned a lot of this trust by giving people the power over their own data. So companies like Atomic, companies like Plaid, that you have to permission your data. This is not
Yeah,
like we're no longer screen scraping, right?
yeah,
You actually give permission to have that data shared with other providers. You say, okay, this is my data. I'm going to give you that without giving, your login information or anything. So you've got that, um, you sort of have that security that it's your data, you own it, and you give it as you see fit. And so I think that that's where like a lot of that trust factor comes in, because you do actually permission it. It's not just, you know, it's not sold. It's not sent out there. I do actually think that there will come a day where we will not only own our own data, but we will be able to monetize it.
yeah, yeah. No, I am all for monetizing. It means free stuff. Hopefully, the consumers know what they're giving up. So
Yeah.
let's move to our final part of the show, which is always my favorite, acronym of the week. A new KYC. I mean, tell me it ain't so.
It is so. So just when you got used to KYC, know your customer, this is actually sort of a play on this. So the new KYC is keep your coins. This is a bill that was introduced by a Congressman, Warren Davidson, who's a Republican from Ohio. For some reason, I don't know why, Pat, but for some reason, whenever there are Republicans introducing sort of crypto-friendly legislation, it sort of surprises me. I don't know why. I guess I have to figure that out in my own way.
I have some thoughts. We can talk about it next show. Maybe we also talk about Biden administration and what they are talking about with crypto, their own U.S. based crypto.
Yes, there's a lot. There's so much. I feel like we could just have a show on crypto alone, but so yeah, this was a bill that was just introduced in late February into the House. Keep your coins, and it is a play on the acronym Know Your Customer. And it's a bill to restrict government control of crypto. And the wording from the bill is basically like to prohibit federal agencies from restricting the use of virtual currency to
Got it.
purchase goods or services, or for other purchases such as crypto transactions. So I think this is really interesting timing of what happened in Canada with the truckers convoy and all of the mask mandates and everything that were happening there, and the crypto transfers and that those wallets being seized. And then also what started to happen with Ukraine and them saying they weren't going to accept crypto, and then some threat of wallets being frozen or seized or whatever. The timing on that seems really interesting. The congressman who introduced the bill said that it's been in the works for years, I just thought for the sake of what's happening in terms of all of these transfers, that this was an interesting acronym for this week. So we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, keep your coins.
It
Gives you
is. I like it.
gives
Know your customer, keep your coins. I mean, we just need multiple versions of everything to confuse Pat a little bit more. But uh, so, Mel, what do you have cooking the next couple weeks?
Well, so we talked about this, I think the last time. We do have South by Southwest coming up. I just finished up this past week, had some really interesting sessions with the Venture Beat Data Summit.
Nice.
You know how we love our data. And I'm doing some research on financial cloud. So I think that right now we're really seeing the vertical clouds come to fruition. We've been talking about this for a while, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about why they're necessary, what the utility is, what the use cases are. But now there's actually some actual sort of case studies, or some launches, or at least some private launches that have happened. I just had an analyst briefing with AWS this week on their financial cloud with NASDAQ, two separate ones with NASDAQ and Goldman Sachs. So these are things that are happening. Just wanting to kind of do some research and take a look on what is, the benefit. What are people in the financial institutions looking at? What do they need? What are the, I think a lot of people have the trepidation on the security side, and how is that getting solved? Of course, when you have financial data, you have security and you have privacy issues. And so how are those being solved? And then also, what are the benefits and kind of all of the utility of it, and why we're seeing this starting to happen. And I think that, obviously the same is happening in retail, the same is happening, I'm sure you see it from, the cloud perspective in all different verticals. It's definitely, it's becoming a real thing, not just a sort of a concept of we're starting to get into this. They're launching and it's happening.
Yeah, listen, I like what I'm seeing so far. I've seen some really interesting things from IBM, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and Oracle. I mean, vertical is the way to go now. It'll be interesting. You have what I would call the cloud native companies that have the jump on cloud native technologies and obviously their own public cloud. Companies like IBM and Oracle have their own public cloud and they have their own hybrid cloud. And then, so it's a really interesting thing here. And I see these, some of these financial clouds as almost ecosystems in a way. IBM has put together things where about 20 financial ISVs are plugged into their financial cloud. So customers can literally go up and do point and click, just like we've seen for other types of cloud application stores. So great stuff, exciting stuff. So
yeah. There's also just a lot of collaboration happening on that front, which I think is interesting. I'm sure you see this, with a lot of the cloud companies that, there's just sort of these end-to-end solutions that aren't just from one company. There's pieces from different companies and creating just a really dynamic solution. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there.
Yeah, sounds good. Great show. I'm really glad to be back here. Have a great weekend. I'm going to be working over the weekend at South by Southwest, and it's not like working and going to parties. I actually have meetings with folks. I have a quantum company that I'm meeting with. I'm meeting with another analyst tonight, Ray Wong, who runs Constellation Research. So it's going to be fun stuff. It's great to see everybody. So thanks everybody for tuning in. This is another episode of More Insights and Strategy, FinTech and Retail Tech Friday. Have a great weekend. And we